A cold autumn rain fell over Washington, D.C. Gray clouds covered the skyline. Television news vans lined the streets outside the federal courthouse. Reporters adjusted microphones. Camera crews prepared for a story that was already making national headlines. Inside Courtroom 7, silence hung in the air. Every seat was filled. Lawyers shuffled stacks of documents. Federal prosecutors whispered to one another. Executives avoided eye contact. And standing alone at the defense table was Sophia Bennett, 38 years old, founder and CEO of Bennett Technologies, America's youngest self-made billionaire. A woman once celebrated as a business genius. Now she stood accused of orchestrating a billion-dollar corporate fraud. Every news channel had already declared her guilty. Social media demanded prison. Investors abandoned her company. Friends stopped answering her calls. Even members of her own board resigned overnight. The woman who once inspired millions now stood completely alone across the hall. A man quietly pushed a janitor's cart. His name was Daniel Carter, 44 years old, single father, federal courthouse janitor. Most people never noticed him. Simple uniform, worn work boots, quiet smile. The kind of man people walked past without remembering. But Daniel hadn't always cleaned courthouse floors. 10 years earlier, he had been one of the country's most respected criminal defense attorneys. Brilliant, fearless, known for defending innocent people no one else believed. His career was rising faster than anyone imagined, until one terrible night. His wife Emily was killed by a drunk driver while returning home from work. Everything changed. Daniel resigned from his law firm, sold his downtown apartment, walked away from millions of dollars in future earnings. Because none of it mattered anymore. Only one person needed him, his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. From that day forward, Daniel became father, mother, teacher, protector, everything. He chose simple work that allowed him to spend evenings with Lily. People questioned his decision. Former colleagues called him crazy, but Daniel always gave the same answer. Some victories happen inside a courtroom. My greatest victory happens every evening when my daughter smiles. For 8 years. No one inside the courthouse knew who Daniel really was to judges. He was the quiet janitor to lawyers, the man who emptied trash bins to security guards. Just another employee. Daniel preferred it that way. His past stayed buried. His law license quietly expired. His expensive suits disappeared. His name faded from legal circles. And he was finally at peace until Sophia Bennett's trial began. Every morning, Daniel cleaned Courtroom 7 before sunrise every morning. He noticed something strange. Sophia always arrived first, long before her lawyers, long before the reporters. She stood alone, reading documents, making notes, never complaining, never crying, even after the entire world turned against her. Daniel admired that. One afternoon, as he emptied a wastebasket, he overheard a heated conversation outside the courtroom. Sophia's lead attorney looked pale. "We're finished." Another lawyer sighed. "Evidence is overwhelming. The jury will destroy us." Sophia remained calm. "So what's your recommendation?" Silence. Then the attorney quietly said, "Recommend accepting the plea deal." Sophia looked directly into his eyes. "But I'm innocent." Attorney lowered his head. "I know. Innocence isn't enough anymore." Those words echoed through Daniel's mind because years earlier, he had spoken almost those exact words to another client. A client who later turned out to be completely innocent. It became the biggest regret of his legal career. The following morning, everything fell apart. News broke that 2 key defense witnesses had disappeared. One withdrew unexpectedly. The other refused to testify. Within hours, Sophia's remaining legal team resigned. Officially, they cited professional differences. Unofficially, they feared losing, or worse, they feared powerful people pulling invisible strings. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Reporters rushed outside. The prosecutor smiled confidently. Even the judge looked concerned. "Sophia Bennett, do you have legal representation?" Sophia slowly stood. Her voice remained steady. "No, Your Honor." Gasps spread across the courtroom. Without an attorney, the trial would become a disaster. The prosecutor immediately stood. "Government is prepared to proceed." Sophia looked around the courtroom. Not one former colleague met her eyes. Not one executive stood beside her. Not one friend. She had spent 20 years building an empire, and in her darkest hour, she stood completely alone near the back of the courtroom. Daniel quietly placed his mop against the wall. He closed his eyes, trying to ignore what he had just witnessed. This wasn't his fight. He had promised himself long ago. Never again, never another courtroom, never another trial, never another impossible case. Then, his phone vibrated, a message from Lily. "Good luck today, Dad. Remember what Mom always said. Good people should never stay silent when someone needs help." Daniel stared at the screen, his heart pounded. Emily used to say those words every single week. He looked toward Sophia. She stood alone, exactly as countless innocent clients once had. Something inside him awakened. Something he thought had died years ago. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Bennett, if no counsel appears, we'll proceed accordingly." Silence filled the courtroom. Then a voice echoed from the back. "Your Honor." Every head turned. Daniel Carter stepped forward, still wearing his gray janitor's uniform, still holding a pair of work gloves. The courtroom looked confused. Some reporters laughed. The prosecutor frowned. The judge raised an eyebrow. "This area is restricted." Daniel nodded respectfully. "I understand, Your Honor. Before this trial continues, I have something the court deserves to know." Sophia stared at him, completely confused. She had spoken to him only once. When she thanked him for returning a folder she accidentally dropped. She didn't even know his name. The judge sighed. "And who exactly are you?" Daniel reached into his pocket, pulled out an old leather wallet, removed a worn identification card, and quietly placed it before the judge. The courtroom clerk read it aloud, then froze. Her eyes widened. She looked back at Daniel, then at the judge. The room fell completely silent. The judge slowly lifted the card, reading every word carefully. His expression changed instantly. He looked directly at Daniel, then spoke words that stunned everyone inside the courtroom. "Mr. Carter, according to this, you were once one of the finest defense attorneys this court has ever seen." Daniel gave a small nod. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge leaned forward. "And are you telling this court that you're willing to defend Ms. Sophia Bennett?" Daniel looked toward Sophia, then calmly answered, "If the court allows it, I intend to defend the truth." Prosecutor's confident smile disappeared. The reporters stopped typing. Sophia felt tears fill her eyes for the first time in weeks, because the one person willing to stand beside her was the man everyone believed was just the janitor.